Hey, welcome to Weld.com, home of TIG Time. Hi, I'm Mr. TIG, and we're going to do a two-part segment on basically back to basics in TIG welding. Let me give you a better example. If you've never TIG welded and you want to get started, how do you get started? What machine do I use? How big of a machine? How small of a machine? And I get the question frequently, what's my favorite machine? Well, that's not a good question because I like the industrial machines. I like the industrial machines because I use the heck out of them. Industrial machines have more endurance, heavier duty. You've seen me use the Lincoln V205 a lot. It's one of my many machines that I like. But it's industrial and it reaches a certain cost. So the person that's trying to get into TIG welding, they need to ask a couple of questions. One is, are you doing DC welding only? And if you're only doing DC welding, then only pay for DC welding. Get a small machine. You can get a DC scratch start machine for under $300. Doesn't mean it's very good, doesn't have a lot of controls on it, but it helps you get started into TIG welding. So you can do steels and you can do body and fender work and things like that. Now, the next question is kind of a leading question. Do you ever plan on doing aluminum welding? And if the answer is yes, then you're going to have to step it up. The cost is going to go up considerably. It doesn't have to go up to tens of thousands of dollars, but your first choice that you have in welding with a machine that's AC/DC is going to cost you somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000. It may be $790 or $780 or $820. You've got to take a look at the features. So I started looking at machines that were under $1,000 that had AC/DC. Now remember, AC for magnesium and aluminum, DC for everything else. What torch comes with the machine? What features does the machine have? Does it arc initiate correctly? Do you have to scratch start? Well, I tested a machine here, and you'll see that it's called an AlphaTIG 200X, and I tested this machine very, very lightly about a year ago. And it's kind of gone full circle because the interest has been there, and I just haven't had time to test it, so now I do. So I'm going to check this machine out and see what's available for this machine, because some of the things that I have found is that the torches, for instance, are just absolutely horrible. And today, as I unpack this, I find that the torch is absolutely horrible. Would I use it? Yeah, I'll use it. But it's a pretty rigid 17 style torch. It's got the old style components with it. All of those can be changed out. I mean, if you have this and you want to change out to better, tighter, smaller components, you can. But I don't like the torch. I don't like what they call a 4T. If you want to attach this to your torch handle, this is the 4T. You click it, and the torch will come on. It'll be live. But it just requires too much pressure, too much activity. So I do want to revert back and describe the foot control is 90% of everything that I will ever do and ever have done. So this has a foot control. And as I inspect it, when I first looked at this foot control, it was difficult because it looks pretty cheap. But as I started using it, it's not terribly bad. Not terribly bad at all. But again, you're looking at a machine that's under $1,000. So what will you accept? What will you not accept? So part of what I'm going to do, and you're going to see this is part of the beginning series of what does Mr. TIG accept. So if you see something that says Mr. TIG Approved, it means that he's either gone back to the manufacturer or figured out ways of making this machine better. So I've already told you that I'm not terribly attracted to the torch. It's functional. It'll get by. Do we have a replacement for it? Absolutely. We're going to cover that a little bit later. This machine comes with some little device here. I think you can stick weld with it, but there's some of you guys out there that are better at this than I am. So just know it comes with it. Plug it in and away you go. Okay, now here's another thing you have to take a look at. You're looking at the regulator, and what you have is a regulator, and this particular regulator, I don't like it very much because it looks like part of the sheet metal is already distorted. And if it's distorted, how do the needles work? And that's just a quality issue. So I suspect that that's going to be pretty normal with every time you get one of these machines. It's just the honest truth. So what you have here is a regulator. One side of it will show you how much pressure is in your gas bottle. The other one will allow you to regulate how much gas you want to come out of the torch. We're going to make some changes on that, but just know that I'm not terribly pleased with that as well. So let's go to the ground clamp. And you know, it looks like it's fairly decent quality. Again, we got to put this in a category. This is a starter machine only. So will it do the job for us or not? And that's part of what I'm going to do in part one. I'm going to do some steel, put it on DC. In part two, I'm going to do aluminum. So I'm going to walk around to the front of the machine, and I'm going to go through the features. And again, I haven't started this machine in over a year, so we're going to see where it stands. Be with you in a minute. Okay, now we're going to talk about the knobs on this machine and the settings to the knobs and what they mean. We're going to start with this knob right here, and this is start amps. And all we're doing is we're telling the machine when we decide to hit the foot control how low or how high we want the amps to start. Now this has a low end of 10 amps. So I actually wanted to light off at 10 amps. I'd like for it to light off at 5, but it just wasn't designed for that. So I'm going to keep it at the low end because I'm doing thin sheet metal type work. Okay, the next one, they call this the main amps. You can turn this all the way up to 200 amps, and it'll show 200 up here. Well, I'm only going to set it at 100 amps, but this also will be your pulse peak. If you turn the pulser on, that's the peak that the pulse is going to see. But I've got 100 amps, so I've got 10 to 100 amps. Now I can come over here in the pulse amps, and this is what they call the pulse base. Sometimes we call that background current. And if you're practicing with pulse, then I recommend starting off at about 50% background current. And so you'll see the pulsing and you'll get the rhythm. Now, just so you know that these companies spend an awful lot of time and effort putting pulsing into the machines, I only use pulsing maybe 2% of the time. So just know that don't put a lot of emphasis and time training on that. When you first start training TIG welding, turn the pulser off completely. Okay, now here's the next one. This is the end amps. When you start to taper off with your foot control, where would you like the arc to snap off? And I like it at low end. I like it at 10 amps. So that's where I've got it set. Okay, now let's get into this next row. And this is the pulse frequency, pulses per second. And you can only take it up to about 5 hertz or 5 pulses per second. Okay, pulse on time, that's kind of a dwell time. How long do you want it to stay up there at the peak before it comes back down? And that's just your choice. So go ahead and put it at 50%. You can play with it. The next one, post flow. It's pretty important. This machine has a 1 second all the way up to, it looks like about 10 seconds post flow. I usually put a post flow of argon at about 5 seconds. When I finish my weld, I hold the arc, I extinguish the arc, and I let the gas flow on there for about 5 seconds. Okay, so now we get into AC balance. Now you can go up here where it says equal. Now we're going to have to play with this machine because I'm not sure where the best or what I call the hot spot is for balance. But I always like to go to less cleaning first. So I'll start there when I decide to start TIG welding aluminum, and we'll do that in part 2. Now let's get down to these toggles, because these toggles can get very confusing as well. This one here, there's 2 cartoons. One cartoon is for a TIG torch, the other cartoon is for stick welding. So once you go into stick welding, you're shutting out the gas solenoid. You're going straight into live arc. But we're going to be doing mostly TIG welding with this. The next one is pretty self-explanatory, AC. We're going to do our aluminum and magnesium and AC. And on DC, we're going to do our steels, stainless steels, Inconel's, titanium. So first of all, we're going to test this machine on DC and see how it does. Now this next feature right here kind of gets confusing, but I got to tell you, this is another one of those 90-10 rules. 90%, probably 95 or 98% of the time, I use the 2T function. And what that means is that I put it in 2T, and when I hit my foot control, the arc comes on immediately on my demand, and when I let off, it goes off on my demand. If you put it into 4T, you can put these little triggers on your torch, and you can use your foot control as well. But you hit the foot control, the arc is on, and you can take your foot off, and it runs by itself, kind of cruise control, until you tap it again, and then it'll go off. But there's really not a huge demand for that, so get back in 2T. Okay, this toggle right here is just telling you whether you turn the pulser on or off. I recommend you start by turning it completely off. And then finally, you get to this little toggle right here, and all it's telling you is that, are you on foot control, or do you have some device on your TIG torch that's controlling your amperage? And again, 90%, 95% probably you're going to be doing foot control. So put it on foot control. So we're going to go over here, we're going to do a little bit of DC welding. Before we do that, I told you that there's a solution to everything. First of all, I didn't like the TIG torch, so I want you to notice there's a whole new TIG torch setup here, and I'll go around in front and show you just before I start welding. But this is manufactured by CK. Ask them to do it, and it's now available. So just want you to know you can throw the old torch, put it aside, do whatever you want with it. Put this torch on. And one of the other things that we have now is we have a regulator for this. I despise the regulator that comes with it. Anyway, this is a regulator flow meter. So this right here will show you the pressure you've got in the bottle, and this allows you fine-tuning of your cubic feet per hour. Now, this has 3 different settings on it. You can look at the meter, you can look at the side of the gauge. One of them is argon, one of them is helium, one of them is CO2. So you have all 3 choices, and this is coming out in the new Mr. TIG series equipment. So just know that we have options for this. The torch that I'm going to be using is a 9F, as in Frank. So if you call, and we're going to give you information how to get it, what to order, but it's called a CK9F. Again, flexible cable. And now we're going to do some DC welding, and let's see how it performs. Okay, so you know, I just tacked it. I welded about 1 inch. I pulled out of the weld. I want to see how it tapers back. Now I'm going to resume the weld again. I like to see the arc starts and stops. It really gives you a pretty good evaluation of the machine. Okay, well this was a lap weld. You know, it's 2 16-gauge materials overlapped, and it's kind of a modified fillet. So it is one of the more difficult type welds, but I handled this with no problem at all. The machine tapers down fine, arc initiation is just fine. Again, the only way that I would even consider using this machine is with a quality torch. I've tried the torch that's on there. For whatever reason, when you initiate the arc with the torch that comes with it, it's a little hotter. It just doesn't start quite as smooth, and when you taper off, it snaps off quicker. So, you know, this is going to complete the DC phase of it, and I certainly want to give it the Mr. TIG approval. Again, without these other accessories, and you can take a look at the show notes and see what's going to be put together for you in some kind of a package or a bundle by Weld.com. But again, this is strictly a beginning type welding machine. Don't use it for industrial. I'm sure people will do that and they'll wear it out pretty quickly. But for home use, so far the DC portion of it, it passes pretty nice. So again, thanks for watching TIG Time. I'm Mr. TIG.